I'm Bruce Warner, President of the Trimet Board of Directors. Yes. I'm going to call this meeting to order. As you can see, we have a number of folks in the audience, a number of folks outside who I understand would like to testify, so we're going to try to move forward through our business as rapidly as possible so that everybody can have an opportunity to state their opinions to the board before we take action on a number of items today that are very, very important to the future of Trimet and Transit. So let's begin with the General Manager's report. Mr. McFarland?
Yes, sir. President Warren, members of the board, thank you very much. And I'll be very brief this morning in light of other agenda pressures. But I did want to begin with what I think are some very impressive ridership numbers that we saw last month. In May, our ridership jumped to near record levels, 9.2 million riders during the month of May. That included impressive growth on commuter rail and MAX. It's only the third time in Trimet's history that we provided more than 9 million rides in 1 month. So it's the highest monthly ridership since 2008. And again, on West, we actually reached a new record of ridership of 1,750 riders on a daily basis. So again, continue to see growth there. The other thing that I just wanted to note was a great kudos to our operations staff and literally hundreds of volunteers from Trimet agency-wide that helped a very successful Rose Festival series of events this year. We were challenged by one new event, which was something called the Rock and Roll Run Half Marathon, which was, I think, a great deal of fun for the people who participated. Not quite so much fun for those who had to worry about rerouting buses off of some very busy east-side streets. So operations handled that challenge as well as the challenges of the huge events of Starlight and Rose Grand School Parade. And again, thanks to both that and a number of volunteers from throughout Trimet that helped make that a great success. I also just want to give you a quick update on the procurement of our 55 new buses. The pilot bus has been here for a while. We've developed a series of comments based on both our customer feedback and our staff's feedback, and that allows us to do some fine-tuning as the actual production buses go into production. And they'll start arriving from Hayward, California, where they're assembled in late summer, and we'll be getting them on very first. And finally, I wanted to give you just a quick update on the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project. With the full funding grant agreement completed and that federal commitment, the project is the commitment's fully funded. And as of June 11th, we have 659 construction jobs, which is a 14% increase from last time I reported these numbers to you. More than 2,700 direct, indirect, and induced jobs as well. And workforce diversity remains a high point. Nearly 21% of the workforce, meaning people of color, 6.2% women, and overall 16% apprentices, which is a very high level. It's very impressive to begin to see the project begin to take shape, part of which is happening outside. I apologize for the noise. But beginning to take shape all the way from downtown Portland into Clackamas. And in that regard, I wanted to introduce for a very brief comment Rick Williams, who has been the long-serving chair of the Portland-Milwaukee Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm very grateful for his work and attention to this project over a long period of time.
Putting my face up there?
That's not me. I didn't do it. That wasn't me, Mary. That was not me.
Chair Warner and board members, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was really pleased to have the opportunity to take a moment to talk to you today. I know you have a very busy schedule. Again, as Neil said, my name is Rick Williams. I'm Executive Director of the Lloyd District Transportation Management Association, but today I'm coming to you as Chair of the Project Citizen Advisory Committee. As Neil said, I've been kind of doing this for a long time. I actually was the original chair of the South North Light Rail Committee back in the 90s, and in 2008 became chair of this committee to facilitate meetings with a committee of 24 representatives of communities along the corridor. Prior to 2008, I actually chaired the committee when Metro facilitated the process to get us through the EIS. So it's been a while, but I'm glad that we're making progress, and the full funding grant agreement is certainly a sign that we've achieved a major milestone. Just to give you a little background, the CAC consists of a broad representation of neighbors, neighborhoods, and stakeholders from up and down the project line. Like I said, we have a 24-member committee, and on any meeting, 80 to 90% of our membership is there, which really demonstrates the commitment of the people who are giving their volunteer time to this project. We come together monthly, as you know now, for several years. Looks like it's going on 4 years, to consider every aspect of the project, from budget to design to impacts and now construction. Over the course of our service, CAC members have met with our communities to hear both ideas and concerns and bring them back to the project team for discussion and, where feasible, inclusion. I think it's important to understand that even though we meet monthly as a CAC, the majority of our members are back into their communities during that 30-day period when we meet and going to multiple meetings, neighborhood association meetings, individual meetings with stakeholders, and then sometimes walking door to door in their neighborhoods talking about this project, both giving information and hearing information back from their communities. I think what it says is that you have a committed and passionate group of citizens in this community who believe in this project and who also believe in their communities. And what we're trying to do is work with you to weave light rail into our lives on this alignment to not only make a great transit connection, but to make a real livable community and a better environment here in Portland, in Milwaukee, and Clackamas County. We've worked collaboratively with Trimet jurisdictional partners and the project design team to ensure the project results in beneficial additions to our community. I can't emphasize the hundreds of meetings that the members of my committee go to each month and each year to represent you, to represent their communities, and to represent this project. And of course, given the size of the project, we've had issues. We don't always agree. We don't always find easy answers to hard questions. And what we've done, but we've always had a two-way communication with staff and with you and with Trimet and with all the partners involved. And I think what that means is the two-way communication was there, and I believe as chair of this committee, we feel that we've been heard and that we've been taken seriously. And so for that, we are very appreciative of staff's role in the project and taking our role as a volunteer citizen advisory committee very, very seriously. I hope project staff would agree with me on this, that we do give and take, and that's what our committee is all about, to hear our community and bring that information back to you and to deal with it. And we've done a very good job of that. As Neil said, we're really thrilled that the full funding agreement is in place, and then now we can put certain issues to rest and move forward with building this project the right way. We're satisfied with what we together with Trimet and many other project partners have been able to accomplish. We've got a lot more to do, and I know you'll see much more involvement of our committee, and you'll hear from us as we move forward. Like countless neighbors and fellow citizens we have discussed the project with over the years, we look forward to taking the MAX line to and from downtown Portland, southeast Portland, and North Clackamas County. We look forward to another option, because that's what this is, in transportation, a proven and fast option for traveling to work, to school, and to recreation when the line opens in 2015. I would close by saying nobody works harder than your staff. Again, hundreds of meetings that our committee members have had in their own communities, but folks like Claudia, Jennifer, Deanne, Rob, Leah, Dave Unsworth, like the Oscars here, I'm going to leave a name out. But I think you need to recognize the work that they do for us and the work that goes on every day. Their evenings are spent in the community. Their days are filled with answering our questions and questions of the community and being the face of the project for you. And I think that's why this is such a success and why our committee is so happy to be where we are, because we have the type of staff that supports a project of this importance for the community. So in the meantime, we look forward to our continuing role of providing you input and letting you know what the community is saying. It's thoughtful input that we'll give you, and it will continue. So with that, I thank you very much, and congratulations on the full funding agreement.
Thank you. Neil, did you have anything else?
No, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
For the board, do we have any comments or questions for Neil or Julie? All right. you very much. All right, moving on then. At this time, we usually get an update from the Finance and Audit Committee from Board Member Swenson. So, are you ready to go this morning?
Pretty much ready to go. Okay. So we met May 9th. This was the last time the Finance and Audit Committee met. And we talked about one topic, that topic being the leases and the remodeling of the Center Street building. So the building across the street. And the scope of the project includes a reorganization of the street office space to an operations exclusive building. The operations control center, the call center, and Trimet operations staff will all be in one location. Relocation of the Trimet staff will then be leased to an office. There will be an office space in downtown Portland. So we talked about all of that reorganization and how it's going to happen and the timing. And the need for this change is the expansion of the control center. Of course, that goes along with the expansion of the rail system. The need for additional office space to replace buildings that will be demolished along 17th, and greater efficiency of having all the operations and personnel in one location. So that was the topic we talked about, and we will have an additional briefing. I think it's at the board meeting in June, which we're at. So if there's any questions from anybody on the board, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
So the last report this morning is regarding the Committee on Accessible Transportation. Is this on right here already? Get a little closer. There we go. So our last report this morning is regarding the Committee on Accessible Transportation, or CAT as we lovingly call it. So Dr. Bethel, I believe you have an update for us this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. For the CAT meeting, which happened on the May 16th and May 21st, had an update of the LIFT program in the third quarter to talk about the LIFT eligibility, accessibility, and eligibility determinations for new and recertifying of LIFT applicants. There's also very much a concern that's been raised about announcements on the maps, particularly exterior announcements at Gelman Field. That has been looked into, and I believe that at this time the announcements are working minute by minute, giving up the updates for the trains as they come through in the schedule. Also want to note again that in terms of the boundaries and the service reduction in the air boundaries for CAT, that in the April meeting they did vote to oppose those particular changes to be implemented in September of this coming year. The third thing and final was a review about the future transit projects that will be coming, particularly around Portland and Walker Light rail stations. And there's quite a lot of discussion around the Type 5 vehicles in terms of how the seating will be arranged to accommodate those with disabilities and mobility devices. And also an issue that has been raised, and I know has been worked on and is continuing, is that about dogs being on the train, service animals versus just a dog that's sometimes just this is my service animal, and then about the electrical shock sometimes that the animals are receiving while they're riding on the trains. But those things are being addressed, and we're thankful for that. That concludes my report, unless there are some questions from the board.
Questions for Dr. Bethel? No? Thank you very much, Dr. Bethel. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to our business then today. The first item of business is our consent agenda. And for those in the audience, these are agenda items that are routine in nature, and we approve them with one motion. There are 4 items on the consent agenda today. Is there a motion from the board to approve? So moved. Have a motion? Second. A second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the items on the consent agenda? If not, please let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the first resolution of the morning. which is Resolution 12-06-44, authorizing the issuance of an additional $70 million of payroll tax revenue bonds to finance transit-related projects, and directing the publication of notice and authorizing the sale of up to $111 million of payroll tax revenue bonds. Mr. General Manager would like to give us a report and comments on this agenda item.
Mr. Board President, just to note that in the past, the board has actually authorized a portion of these bonds for the Portland-Milwaukee project, and that was done with the policy resolution that authorized the advancing of the project. This resolution then would authorize the sale of those bonds following the signatures for the full funding grant agreement that occurred in May. In addition, there's another $70 million of new authorization that would be approved by this resolution. Those are for bus replacement, for radio replacement systems, for data systems, for positive train control systems, and other needs that are part of our long-term forecast and our capital fund. So it authorizes those new payroll tax bonds in the amount of about $70 million, as well as the sale of those bonds for the Portland-Milwaukee project that were previously authorized by the board. And so that totals to the total that you see in your staff report of $111 million. I know I would ask Beth to come up in case there are questions on this, but this is timely now, given both the requirements for the Portland-Milwaukee funding, where local funding is due after the signatures on the full funding grant agreement. And so we and the rest of our partners are in the
Calvin right here when we actually build
the project development. With that, we're happy to answer any questions for you.
Did you have anything you guys wanted to add?
I will respond to questions. I think
Okay, very good. So, first off, questions from the board. I will point out we have 4 people who would like to testify on this item this morning, so we can also have a discussion after we hear the testimony. Okay. Beth, I'm going to pull up 2 people at a time here, so why don't we ask you to sit back, and we'll probably bring you back up in a moment here. So I have 4 people who wish to speak to this item. I'll call them up 2 at a time, and that's John Ludlow and Janice Dinsmer. I'm sorry, I murdered that name. They'll tell me what it really is, right? Okay.
I'm Janice Geisina.
Oh, thank you. Way off. Thank you very much. Since you're there, why don't you proceed?
Thank you very much for allowing me to come today and give you my thoughts. Trimet is already unable to meet its obligations to fund employee retirement expenditures in their current and proposed budgets. These are piling up debt at a rate of over $2 million a week. It is an egregious use of taxpayer money to go into more debt for this resolution. The Trimet OPEB retirement fund is not being funded at actual expenses. Instead, Trimet only contributes about 18% of the cost, leaving a deficit of 82% funding and ongoing debt piling up. This is millions every week. It is piling up quickly. What will you do? It is obvious that Trimet cannot afford to pay for its current responsibilities. This is totally unsustainable. The board must show restraint in its management of the budget and bring it to a responsible effort for current and future debt that are balanced, not borrow more money. The financial future of our community is at risk. Please help us remember that the function of the board of directors is to set the agenda, followed by the staff to carry out the request, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. My name is John Ludlow. I'm currently the front runner for Clackamas County chair position. We out in Clackamas County, as observed here probably in the last few years, have a new idea in regards to the initiatives, i.e. specifically the spending of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. You saw the first lesson given on the Selwood Bridge, second lesson on urban renewal, and now the third lesson is about to be delivered. That is the vote on light rail. It seems that many of you in this room, I'm pretty sure, don't like the idea of the public participating in this kind of thing. fact, previous testimony said stakeholders, what the community wants, but nobody seemed to mention the voters and what they want. If elected, I intend to allow the voters to vote on whether they want light rail in the county. As you know, there will be an election in September, and the prediction is pretty easy for me. It's going to win with a landslide. That will create all kinds of problems, and Trimet's attorneys have said, well, we'll sue Clackamas County should you not perform. Clackamas County doesn't have the $25 million everybody speaks of. They don't have it. In fact, their only way to get it right now would be to take the increment that's coming back from Clackamas Town Center after 30 years of being an urban renewal at $1.8 or $1.9 million a year, and to use that money on a bond basis, again, just like you're doing here today, to pay for the rail. That's untenable. In fact, our sheriff says that you're taking money in the front door for his purposes and taking it out the back door. This cannot continue. You're spending at $1.2 billion, as was just mentioned, in arrears for your pension fund, and yet you're bonding more money. That can't be real, you guys. When are you going to tackle the $1.2 billion that you already owe? Nobody's come up with a plan on how that's going to be paid. So I hardly recommend that you do not pass this measure, and in fact scale back the rail to Tacoma, because Clackamas County will soon indicate to you that they don't want light rail. Now, I don't know what it is about Trimet, and let alone Metro, and all the powers that be, that they do not want to hear from the public, but you will hear from Clackamas County voters very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. The next two, and we've had a couple more folks who would like to indicate they'd like to also testify. John Charles and Bob Clark, please. Team visitors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Charles, president of Cascade Policy Institute. And it's completely appropriate that we're meeting here today in a condemned building on a condemned street where it's the perfect juxtaposition of the priorities of the agency, that you have a room full of people concerned about bus cuts, and they're about to implement a fifth round of cuts, and your non-unionized employees haven't had a raise in about 4 years. And all around us outside, we're spending vast amounts of taxpayer money to blow up buildings, send hundreds of private sector tax-paying jobs somewhere else, so you can run a slow train down the middle of the street to replace 2 bus lines already there. That's your number one priority? That is really amazing. So to the resolution, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say you have a list of projects on the staff report that says where it's going to go, but when I read the actual wording of your resolution, that's not in there. No, the resolution says it's for transit-related projects. That's whatever your management team wants to spend on, pretty much. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And the second is, I suggest, given the fact that you don't have a sustainable business model, that you perform a triage exercise on this list today, and that you simply, before you vote, separate what do you absolutely have to finance now by law or policy, and what do you absolutely have to finance now through revenue bond debt financing. And those things perhaps should go forward. Other things on the list that are nice to have, or once, or discretionary, don't need to have right now. I suggest those can wait 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks until you deal with the issues you discussed last week at your retreat, which is how are you going to get from here to there on a path to financial sustainability. If you approve all these today to create basically a slush fund for transit-related projects, then you surrender your leverage, and then you're stuck with 2 bad things. An employee contract that you know is not sustainable, and debt financing that you know is not sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Mr. Clark.
Hello. Bob Clark, Southeast Portland, and an active member of the Taxpayer Association of Oregon. dear board members and general manager. The members of the Taxpayer Association of Oregon are very concerned about Trimet's issuance of additional debt here in this resolution. Trimet staff has yet to present a serious plan for bringing about financial stability, particularly when Trimet's unfunded liabilities continue sharply to escalate. We recommend holding back approval until staff presents a more definitive plan for meeting unfunded liabilities and adverse labor arbitration outcomes. After all, increasing payroll tax rates to cover increasing amounts of debt load and other liability stands to hurt the long-term future of our metro area economy. Nationally, payroll taxes have been cut to help foster a better economy. By comparison, approving the issuance of new debt backed by payroll tax revenues threatens to increase payroll tax rates and by so doing compromise gains in our local economy going forward. Moreover, it is concerning to see Trimet seemingly rush into additional debt, construction expense, and development expense, building the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail when citizen opinion of it may be turning rapidly against it, as witnessed by the most recent political development in Clackamas County. And also, federal support for the project can also change with election outcomes, potentially leaving Trimet holding the bag on the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project, so to speak. I have seen the federal government retract on what was thought an ironclad agreement on things. As a civil servant, I've seen it happen. I imagine it can happen here. It's called government convenience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Okay. Moving on, I have Jim Howell and Steve Show.
That's Jim.
Thank you. My name is Jim Howell. I'm here representing the Oregon Association of Oregon Rail and Transit Advocates. Milwaukee Light Rail is well on its way, and I don't think there's any way to stop that. I'd like to speak about in the future. Bonding using payroll tax and fare box revenue for major capital projects is not right. It should not be done. This should be the last project that ever uses those funds for major capital projects. If you're going to go for the major capital project in the future, like for example, Extension North, the Yellow Line, or a new line to the Southwest, the capital, local capital funds should come from a new source of revenue, and I think you folks ought to be out there right now looking at how you're going to get that revenue. On the West Side Light Rail, you asked for a vote and the people approved it, and that's where you got the revenue to match the federal government. Taking it out of operating money is absolutely wrong. What it does, it diminishes your ability to add service, and you can see by what's happened in the bus service since 2009, you've been cutting back, you're basically eating your seed corn, and it's absolutely the wrong way to go. So in the future, I would hope that you would make the commitment never ever to use payroll tax or fare box revenue for debt service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell.
Steve Shopman from Walton. About 2 years ago, the sheriff of Clackamas County and the Clackamas County Fire District chief came in here and objected to the funding for Milwaukee Light Rail, and they were rudely dismissed and asked for the next person to testify. And ever since then, over the 2-year period, the county, this board here has ignored literally everything. It's not just some things. It's not just some concerns. It's everything, including your own organization. Mr. Clyde, you've been involved in a lot of these things for years, and I've had the opportunity to talk to you about some things back in the Big Look task force and a variety of things in your paper. Your organization covers a lot of these things. It's stunning that such a severe level of disregard has culminated in this project. You never did have that local funding. All of it has been a messed up financing package that we all know now is ripping off these people behind us, is ripping off their bus service, is ripping off your own organization, is ripping off services at every conceivable level in the city of Portland. They have no funding. But a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, the Sheriff of Clackamas County wrote a scathing letter to the Board of County Commissioners detailing how their participation in this will directly impact public safety and the lives of his deputies. You have come so far that you are disregarding public safety. How is it that a light rail project in its entirety, God forbid you should cut it back and phase it back to something acceptable, but how do you arrive? It's your responsibility. This gentleman and the organization only does what you allow him to do. You should fire him, but that's not going to happen. He's got an immense staff to deliver all the goods here, and you nod. But consider the public safety thing. What do you think public safety is? Is it just a bureaucracy that may be a little short on money? No, it's crime. What's crime? Well, it's auto break-ins, it's theft, it's shoplifting, it's rape, murder, abuse of children, the elderly, and everyone in between. All of that is going to go up if you give this guy a yes today. But how do you square that? Where's Portland getting their money? They're ripping off everything under the sun. Where are you getting your money? I've got an email from Mary Fex saying that you're going to borrow, tens of millions of dollars against your future operating capital. We know you're going to get payroll tax increases. You're going to have additional revenue in the future, but you have a whole list of things to pay for it. And you have to know that arriving money is going to be short of fixing your internal crisis. So how do you take money and commit it to debt servicing this project? Milwaukee has admitted in the paper, in public hearings, that they are going to cut services that they have to pay their share. So I ask you, every single one of these burdens, from Portland to Trimet to Milwaukee and Clackamas County, and even some of the Metro Flex funds, all of them can be remedied if you simply make a prudent decision to scale the project back to Tacoma. You can even include the 1,000 parking garage at Tacoma and make the thing work. You can have a ribbon cutting at the end of the day. You can jump up and down and believe that the project is a completion at that phase. All of the local remedies are fixed if you simply do something rational now. Please do it, sir. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yay.
The last two folks I have is Jerry Ward and State Representative Katie Iyer.
I'm Jerry Ward, longtime member of South Waterfront URAC, representing Southport Neighborhood Association. Early on, transportation, a major task of Trimet, was identified as a major concern deficiency of South Waterfront, especially vehicle connection to the rest of the region. City PDC Trimet promised, and is required by state and city regs, to provide adequate all forms of transportation before development of urban renewal, like South Waterfront can proceed. I want to point out how Trimet's policies budget is not meeting the city's and Trimet's requirements by using South Waterfront as an example. Over 32 street projects were identified by PDC PDOT for South Waterfront to meet the transportation obligations. Only one has been accomplished. Southwest Moody has been rebuilt, modified 3 times since 1999. The North Portal into South Waterfront isn't even off the drawing boards. The Central Portal and the I-5 freeway exits were canceled. Nothing has been done for street accessibility, and the future of any of these projects is bleak. South Waterfront is broke. A few years back, Sam took $10 million of South Waterfront tip dollars for Milwaukee Light Rail, and then took another $10 million from South Waterfront of SDC charges for Milwaukee Light Rail. And several months ago, the PDC financial experts confirmed that South Waterfront TIF property tax dollars are less than the debt service of the urban rural area, approaching $290 million of TIF. The income coming in projected is in the range of $9 million, while the debt payments are $14 million. South Waterfront is broke. Then, at our last URAC meeting, PDC Director Patrick Quinton reaffirmed the broke fact. Patrick stated, PDC is running out of money. These are direct quotes. Quote, "Era of TIF is over. Political climate of the urban and rural is challenging. All of Portland's urban and rural areas will expire in 11 years. These are the quotes. Trimet's board and management and planners need to recognize this reality, and this latest proposed board bond issuance doesn't. Now, I want to dissect this really down to the average citizen and what Trimet policies and direct actions mean just in South Waterfront and how it affects the whole Southwest and the rest of the region. Look at the headline in the Southwest Portland Post in just this recent issue in June. It states, light rail may mean bus cuts for Southwest Portland neighborhoods. It states Northwest College of Naturopathic Medicine is, quote, is seeking to encourage as many students and business trips to use means other than cars. However, they may be thwarted by Trimet plans. And NCNM's Keith North said Trimet officials have said that West Side service on 8 of the 9 bus lines to the area would be eliminated once the bridge, Trimet's new bike bridge, opens, with the aim of utilizing light rail exclusively. Just this one example shows how Trimet isn't serving its citizens. Trimet needs to recognize it's broke, recognize its main local seed money is broke, urban and rural is broke, and become fiscal prudent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Representative Dee Air. I represent Oregon House District 29, Western Washington County area. And I just, first off, want to couch this in terms of thanking you for your service. I understand that you are often required to have Solomon's wisdom while trying to figure out how to match the core mission of this organization for which you represent, and how to do it in light of an eroding balance sheet, a quickly declining fiscal balance sheet. I'm a CPA, and so my testimony will be centered around the financial situation and how this $111 million offsets it. So my concern is approving this new $111 million of additional debt secured by future payroll taxes on the heads of employees, those fortunate enough to have a job, and also by self-employed folks who are fortunate enough to actually have some kind of profitable business. But it isn't just that. If we could afford that debt and the debt was reasonable and for a good purpose, I'm concerned because you also do not have, as far as I can see, and if you have it, I hope to actually read it, and I pray that you do have it, some kind of significant financial plan to unbury yourself, long-term financial plan, concrete, a business plan, like any other organization would be required to have. You have heard loud and clear, and you're already aware of the $1.2 billion of debt, unfunded, both on balance sheet and off balance sheet. How does an organization with approximately $500 million of current operating revenues and over $1 billion of total revenue resources dig out of an off-balance sheet liability, unfunded, of this amount, this $1.2 billion, with no plan to fund these existing commitments? While yet you argue, the organization argues, that $111 million to fund deferred maintenance and to heavily invest in light rail is actually best practices for a transit agency. How is this the best that we can give to taxpayers, to citizens, and to riders? As a state representative, I'm keenly aware of who I answer to, and that is only to the citizens, both in my district and the state of Oregon. Yes. You as board members of Trimet, you are beholden to the citizens, the riders, and the taxpayers, and absolutely to no one else. And I want to encourage you when you make this decision to be mindful of who you are answerable to and who you own a fiduciary duty to. Good. I understand that these payroll tax, the payroll tax revenue bonding fits within the board-approved debt policy, but I want to encourage you to look back when that policy was approved. Did it include fully the unfunded liabilities, the off-balance sheet liabilities? And I also remind you that the off-balance sheet transactions are what brought down such large organizations such as Enron. A debt is a debt, whether it is for retirement or whether it's to Wall Street, whether it's for post-employment benefits. A debt is a debt. And retirement commitments can't be deferred in perpetuity. Eventually, they will come due. And that due date is moving closer and closer to us as we move forward in time. In balancing the 2013 budget, Trimet's proposed raising certain fares, and through your own analysis, it's directly resulting in decreased ridership. And I don't understand how this short-term financial plan to fill a budget gap is actually continuing the core mission of moving people around our area. Is this the birth pain of financial implosion? If this action is necessary for managing one budget, just one single budget, will this be the financial fix for longer-term planning? And with the significant off-balance sheet debt, will this financial maneuver experience exponential rate increases to riders when employed in future years for expanding debt? This is what I'm asking the Trimet to do, is to establish a full financial long-term plan, a business plan with serious analysis on how to pay off, even through annual payments, how to pay off the significant existing debt, the unfunded liabilities. How are you going to do that? And you can't simply look at the same financial tools, the same band-aids of federal dollars on increased services, on coming to the legislature for more payroll tax increases or extensions of payroll tax, or increasing rider fares substantially while diminishing services. Your hole, your financial hole, is too deep to rely on the normal bag of tricks. You must dig yourself out. You need a plan before any tax increase or extension is approved by the legislature, and I hope that Trimet will be able to report to the legislature and demonstrate that they have exercised fiscal prudence and good stewardship over the taxpayers' money. Approving $111 million in new debt without a plan, without a roadmap of how to bury yourself, or even a hint of fiscal restraint with capital-intensive projects is, in my opinion, not exercising fiscal prudence or good stewardship over taxpayer funds. I've served on boards, I've served in the legislature, I know how this works, and in all likelihood, either today or in a near future meeting, up to $111 million of this bond will likely be approved. I get that. But I encourage you to push back a bit and to no longer follow this organization into an ever-deepening hole of financial insolvency. I encourage each one of you to lead this organization out and into financial stability, fiscal sustainability. I urge you to be that your choice, follow or lead. And my request is that you will sit back and direct the staff to develop your fiscal roadmap, long-term admittedly, I get that, the hole is very deep. And that would be leadership. Encourage that before voting on that. Take that financial leadership step. Beholden to the citizens, the riders, and the taxpayers, and earn and maintain the greater trust of the community. Thank you.
That concludes the public testimony on this item. It's now time for the board to, I think, discuss this and decide if we want to take action on this. So first off, do we want to get a motion on the floor to start the discussion, or do you want to have some dialogue here before we get a motion?
Well, I'd like to provide some dialogue, but I'd also like to provide a motion.
Okay.
Ask for the discussion.
Second. Motion and a second on resolution 12-0644. So yeah, let's have a little discussion. Do you want to start?
Members of the board and members of the community, I think despite how we're characterized, whether the poster children of complaint or of Enron or other entities, I think over 2 years I've served on the board, almost to the day, I've seen a remarkable metamorphosis both within the community that's positive and within the Trimet organization, and certainly the board, a metamorphosis of engagement and listening despite when folks disagree, that doesn't mean the conclusions without understanding or hearing, and disagreement doesn't have to be characterized in castigation. Having said that, over the last couple of weeks, the board has been discussing board members amongst each other, one-on-one, and a process of establishing a policy about our budget going forward. And Mr. Chair, I think, given the significance of the issues and that this particular resolution addresses, and some of the concerns or complaints that we've heard in the last 6 to 8 members of the community providing testimony, it might be an appropriate time for us to share with the public what some of those considerations are now rather than possibly later, so that members of the community would understand that our entire meeting today is about appropriate financial stewardship moving forward, not singular one-off votes on given measures, whether they're $111 million, which is a substantial number, and a board decision changing fares, which are significant measures of change for our community. I think that context might assure the representative candidates for office and the general public that we are doing business in a very transparent and a different way that does provide not only today's decisions in an appropriate way, but the future in a very different managed way.
Okay. You're looking at me? I'm just looking at my board members. Okay. Sorry to be looking at you. Okay. So maybe we get some other dialogue, maybe we can talk about some more that I think very much fits in. I know, Director Stovall, you had some questions and thoughts on this agenda item. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, actually, they're going to start with that. So, in regards to kind of the concepts and ideas surrounding this bond measure, this bond issuance. First off, and the representative spoke about our debt policy. Can we get just a little bit of background on how that fits into, how this fits into what that number is?
Certainly. And I will also defer to Board Member Schweitzer, who's chair of the Finance Committee, who was also chair of the committee when we passed the debt policy. But best practice for any governing board is to understand the different types of debt the organization has and have a policy about how the debt is issued and the level of debt issuance. And the policy that the board approved in 2010 did exactly that. With respect to payroll tax bonds, there was a lot of discussion about what that appropriate level would be, back and forth with the staff, asking us to do more homework, look at peers, look at other governmental entities. And the decision was made, embodied in the policy, that the debt service, the annual amount of debt service paid on all outstanding payroll bonds, will be less than 7.5% of Trimet's continuing resources. So not our total resources, because our total resources include one-time things and revenues that are dedicated specifically to certain expenses, but our continuing resources. So the debt that we are proposing, the $111 million, fits well within that limit. After the issuance of these bonds, should you approve them, it would be debt service would be about 5.5% of continuing resources. And to put that in the framework for someone's debt, it's like a mortgage. If someone had a $60,000 a year income, that was their continuing revenue, and that would allow them to, and they were paying 5.5% on their mortgage, they could have their mortgage monthly payment would be $275 a month. So, or if their mortgage payment were 5.5% of their continuing resources. So, a relatively low level, moderate debt burden compared to the peers in our industry. And the investments that we are proposing are long-term investments which are appropriately paid over time. We discussed the other day the concept of intergenerational equity, that for an asset that's going to last 30 years, it's appropriate to have taxpayers and the fares pay for that over time, rather than, because it will be used over time, rather than paying for it all up front. So that is a concept that's frequently applied to public financing and debt financing in the public sector.
Could you speak on the 5.5, because there was the 5% up to, I believe it was 10% that we had staff look at.
Right.
And we arrived at a number somewhere in
7.5. Yes. Yes.
And could you explain that a little bit? Because it's somewhat complicated.
Yes, and there is, I mean, it is a judgment issue. There is no hard and fast rule that the Government Finance Officers Association says, or the transit industry says is the right number. But in looking at what other governmental agencies have done in the debt policies that are set, we found a range that the staff and the board felt comfortable with as a kind of peer group of 5 to 10%. And we had started talking about a 10% limit, and at the recommendation of the Finance Committee, set to be 7.5%. And there are many transit agencies that have significantly higher, much higher debt burdens, and we didn't include them in our sample.
Thank you. And I think that the policy that was set was, we set that a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And that is something that we can also revisit, talk about, change at some point if that was something we wanted to do. But we felt comfortable with the 7.5.
And, you know, one of the comments, and I'll respond to one of the comments that was made, which raises, I think, about the point. You know, when this policy was set, was the idea of the size of the OPEB, something that was readily discussed at that point in time, and what the future impacts of potentially funding that are going to be in light of the debt policy that we currently have in place. So that's...
I can, the OPEB, I'll defer to the board, but I'll start the conversation. The OPEB liability has been well known. I've been here almost 4 years. It's been published now for 4 years. We were, governmental entities of our size were required to publish the OPEB liability starting in 2008, and we complied with that. It has been front and center of the discussions in staff meetings and at the Finance Committee and with the board. It's certainly the disclosure in our financials. I've personally rewritten it every year to make it more clear. So there is and has been an awareness of that and a concern. And I'll let the board speak more to that as well. But it has also been, it is an issue. We published it in 2008, but the liability is the result of 30 years of past actions. And I think I speak for everyone in saying that we're not going to solve that in the first year. To solve that in 1 year would be dramatic cuts to service, fare increases, and not, in my opinion, the appropriate response. We need a long-term response to that while continuing to operate the agency in a fiscally prudent manner.
The OPEB issue, even before Beth got here, was something that we tackled and discussed. And you're right that it's not something that is going to go away in the first year or even first few years. We talked about that at our retreat as well. We know the significance of it. And it's something we have to know is something we're working on for a long-term plan. I'm kind of confused as to your question, or if you're making a statement. Just something we need to
that's primarily in response to the question that was asked. They said, you know, basically, have we reevaluated that policy in light of having to deal with funding of the OPEB liability? So it wasn't a question in regards to something that is going to really adjust kind of what I'm doing or what a question I'm asking. It's more so saying and responding to that question because I thought it was a great comment in regards to, in light of this, in light of what we were potentially going to need to do, how is this going to impact our ability to be able to fund that liability long-term? Is this 10-year? What are these 10-year bonds?
The life of the bonds will, the longest will probably be 20 years. There's a rule that we comply with and we are required to comply with under federal tax law because the bonds are tax exempt. that the life of the bond cannot be longer than the useful life of the asset. So we will do a calculation with our bond counsel, but not longer than 20 years.
But it's a question was it taken into account at the time of the debt? Very much so. So it's not something we were just kind of kept in the background with.
Excellent. I've got one final question. From a cash management perspective, other transit agencies, they issue debt for capital projects, and our debt funds capital projects. So it funds things like the list that we're talking about, new buses, which I've heard consistently across the board. Some folks say, we need to improve our buses. We need to make sure they're clean and nice and can take care of the folks that ride them. And so a significant portion of these dollars are going to go to replace our buses. And those buses will have a 10-year expected life. So these are things that, as we have an aging bus fleet, correct? We have an average age that's higher than the national average, where transit agencies would like to be. So these things aren't going to fund current operations.
Absolutely not.
But the dollars come out of operations at that up to 7.5%.
Correct.
So then, in some instances, this could improve our operations from a perspective of lower maintenance costs on those buses, and some of that offsets. But then also, in regards to the public being satisfied with the product that we have to deliver to them, is going to improve many of those things also.
All well said and all true. The investments. You stated a fundamental principle of long-term borrowing, which is we cannot and do not borrow to fund operations. All the borrowing is for capital projects that have been vetted and approved through the internal process of prioritizing capital projects. Some of the projects on this list are required because of the train control, a safety requirement on West because it shares track with freight, the new communication system required by the FCC, which will also enhance the efficiency and productivity of the bus fleet, allowing better operations. The new buses, both will be an improved customer service and will also reduce the maintenance costs, road calls. It will improve the customer experience by having fewer breakdowns. Reliability. So, and a number of the other investments will also improve the efficiency of the operation.
Thank you.
One of the things that we heard in the public testimony very strongly was the need for this agency to have a strategic financial plan. We provide a lot of very crucial services, and our first responsibility is to make sure that those services can continue. We've also have responsibility to make sure that we're in a position to provide continuing services in the future. That means improved modes, and so it's all a large balancing effort that needs to happen. One of the things I want the audience to know is this board held a retreat last week, to talk about how we as a board work together, number one, because there are 3 new members and it's a kind of a new mix of folks. But we also talked about what our priorities for the short term are, and we identified 3 things that we want to work on. One of those is to put together a work plan to address our financial issues. And to that end, Board Member Schweitzer and myself have been tapped to work with Beth Hamill to start putting that work plan together. In fact, we have our first meeting this week, I think it is. So we are putting time and effort into that. We will be seeing that. It will be coming back to the board as an initial work plan to get the board's input and feedback on it. It's something that we'll be devoting some serious time and energy to. So we're trying to balance all of these efforts while keeping the organization operating on a sound footing. So we have to make sure that we're moving forward on all fronts.
To the motion, Mr. Chair, Mr. President. I believe that all board